Thank you, members. We now move on to questions to the Minister for Communities. If I could advise the House that questions number 1 and number 12 have been withdrawn, and I call Mr Maurice Bradley.
Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, question 2.
Thanks very much, and just with your permission, I intend to answer questions 2 and 7 together. The unprecedented energy prices this year, and indeed last year, have meant that those who are already struggling financially are facing added pressures. I am aware that many individuals, and particularly those on low incomes, without additional support may struggle to heat their homes or pay their energy bills. That's why on the 13th of January this year, I announced that I have secured £55 million for an energy payment support scheme for individuals on low incomes who are struggling to meet the rising energy costs due to the global fuel crisis. This is a one-off payment of £200 being made automatically to around 280,000 eligible individuals in receipt of specified benefits without the need for an application. I also recognise that there was a need for a smaller complementary fund for people in very immediate crisis. People and families at risk of disconnection or would have had been disconnected, people who need immediate help delivered quickly. I was therefore delighted to announce on the 29th of December that my department would contribute £2 million to an emergency fuel payment scheme operated by Bryson. The scheme itself is a collaboration between the Utilities Regulator, the Consumer Council and a number of energy providers, and I would like to thank all of the organisations for their work and contributions to this scheme. The scheme will deliver targeted emergency support to those in a fuel crisis and who have temporary inability to meet their fuel costs. As of the close of play on the 14th of January, 2,358 applications have been made. 1,323 have been validated and eligible, and 1,098 have received their fuel payment. Bryson expects to process around 300 to 400 applications a day, although this will be subject to constant review.
If I could pause the Minister there, you'll be able to give the rest of the information in the supplementary. Mr Bradley for a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, and thanks to the Minister for the comprehensive answer. So we'll hear the rest later, but thank you very much for that, Minister. Minister, it's my understanding that over 300,000 homes throughout Northern Ireland and only 300 applications per day. The frustrations experienced by people are trying to get onto the website and trying to get through by phone. Therefore, Minister, would it be apt for you to look at introducing a multi-agency task force to deal with this problem immediately and ongoing, as I think we're in for this for quite some time to come?
Well, of course, I look at the ongoing issues. I've met with a variety of organisations, and just developing a task force isn't going to deal with the immediate problem. On the one hand, we do have fuel poverty within our society, and we're looking at action plans and, of course, the housing revitalisation programme to start to address those longer-term systemic issues. But we're also in a global fuel crisis where we are at this point, and, of course, those other programmes will mitigate, but it won't overcome the issues that we're facing. So the bigger issue, the Bryson scheme was never intended. It was to target 20,000 individuals, and it was always to be additional to the £55 million scheme, which will target 280,000 individuals over the next period. We also paid out just to under 300,000 pensioners the winter fuel payment, and those payments indeed went out in November and December as well. And of course we have other supports through discretionary support, for example, in terms of those who find themselves in crisis. But we also need larger government's responses to this, and I know that the Finance Minister had wrote to the British Government on the removal of VAT in terms of energy bills, and again I have been pushing that we again push the British Government in terms of a response around that. I will be joining the Economy Minister, who has responsibility in terms of energy policy, and I know that he's gone out for consultation on this at the moment. We're going to the British-Irish Council meeting to look at the rising costs in energy on the 4th of February. So again, these specific asks around VAT and others, we will be making that at that meeting.
Ms Liz Kimmins.
Corla, and I thank the Minister for such a comprehensive answer so far, and certainly with the unprecedented pressures from the spiralling fuel costs that we're all seeing, the schemes that she's mentioned are very, very welcome and very important in supporting and assisting people and families struggling at the minute with the cost of living crisis. Just on your last points, Minister, would you therefore agree with me then that this cost of living crisis that we're all witnessing and experiencing is so significant that it is at a level that we need to see urgent action by the British Government?
I think definitely. I mean, somebody's making profit out of these rising costs, and it's not people who are living here, but obviously people across the globe are struggling as a result of it. So that's why governments who have the necessary tax powers have to take further action. So, as I said, the Finance Minister has written to the British Government in terms of the VAT, which is one quick way that people would see an impact on their bills, and that would be all households that would pay bills as well. So, again, I would urge the British Government. I know that many organisations in England, Scotland and Wales as well have been calling for this action, and of course it was discussed at the executive meeting last week. And again, I would hope, as a united executive, we can continue to put that pressure on the British Government to act in this regard.
Mr. Jim Allister.
Could the Minister clarify, if someone successfully applies to the emergency fund, are they then also eligible for the energy payment support scheme? And is there any household limit in respect of either scheme?
They can apply. If you're applying for the Bryson scheme, you will still get the automatic payment, because the Bryson scheme is to deal with an immediate potential threat of losing their fuel support or being cut off or disconnected. And obviously, as part of the process of applying for that, they do have to provide evidence. And I know Bryson have been working in terms of making that more understood in advance of someone making an application. So, of course, that system is being developed as the scheme begins to roll out. On the other hand, the other payments are those. My main function was to target those on the lowest incomes, and that would be those in receipt of means-tested benefits, and that's 281,000 individuals. So they will be the ones who will receive a direct payment without application of £200 that will be directly paid into their bank or post office account or whatever account they've highlighted in terms of receiving their benefits.
Mr. Pat Cantney.
Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answers so far. Minister, would you accept the failure to communicate details of the £2 million emergency fuel scheme before its launch has resulted in widespread confusion and frustration?
Well, I do agree that there's been some media coverage that's led to an expectation or indeed a perception. Of course, there's learning in terms of front-loading the information even on the system. And I think the Department, in working with Bryson, has been quickly adapting to that. I think, you heard the head of Bryson on the radio, or some may have heard him this morning, just the unprecedented demand. A scheme that's targeting 20,000 people with a demand of over 280,000 trying to contact the scheme will never be fit for purpose in that way. So it was never intended to do that. That's why the larger fuel support scheme of £55 million is to try and get to as many households as possible. I did try to extend that scheme, for example, to look at issues of tax credits, but because that's a reserved matter, it has to be HMRC who advised when we requested that they make the payment. They said they couldn't make the payment, that they would need a change in primary legislation, and that would be done with outside this financial year where the money needs to be spent.
Mr. Andy Allen.
Mr. Speaker, and the Minister's highlighted and our colleagues highlighted the unprecedented scale of the cost of living crisis we're facing, and we're all of the mind that that will last for many years, unfortunately. Can the Minister outline what the Department's long-term strategy to dealing with this is? As such, has they given consideration to the introduction of the Warm Homes discount?
I think there's been ongoing. There's obviously the fuel poverty strategy in terms of warmer, healthier homes. we will be looking to upgrade the strategy, and that's one of the key areas that we'll be looking at over the next period. And as I said previously in this chamber, and I know the committee as well have heard it, that we want those to align to the Executive's energy strategy and the green growth strategy as well, in terms of looking at the holistic issues. Now, I know some of those have been produced, so my officials are engaging with officials in DAERA and economy to bring forward a scheme as well. And of course, we're engaging with sectors. I've met a number of organisations. I know in terms of the immediate crisis, we have received numerous correspondence from different organisations who want to help. So we're looking at this over the next period in terms of what we need to do. And of course, the whole area around the housing revitalisation, that's going to be a fundamental piece as well to ensure that homes are fit for purpose, because there has been decades of underinvestment, for example, in housing executive stock where energy is just being released. So that whole system and fundamental approach in terms of looking at this. And of course, we're continuing to engage the utilities regulator, the Consumer Council and others as we start to move forward in terms of those longer-term systemic areas.
I appreciate the other members rising in their place, but we're 10 minutes into question time now, so I'm going to move on. Ms Joanne Bunting.
Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, question 3, please.
As with all departments, the resources available to the Department for Communities is extremely limited. I will continue to prioritise the resources that I do have towards protecting the most vulnerable and providing support to hard-pressed families, workers and their families. And so therefore I have no plans to introduce a grant scheme related to the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. However, community organisations may be able to apply the existing funding schemes for financial support towards programmes or activities. DFC provide funding to 11 councils for the Community Festivals Fund, and councils provide match funding and administer the scheme on behalf of the department. So organisations may be able to apply through that resource.
Ms Bunting.
Thanks, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister recognise that many far beyond unionism respect and admire Her Majesty and would participate in community celebrations? Does she see that this is an opportunity for community cohesion and actually would bring some light to a very terrible situation for those vulnerable people to whom she refers? Does she understand that this is international and historic and so is bigger than local government? And why will she not establish a fund?
There are many people here who see the British monarchy in a very respectful way and who actually support that. And of course it is a key occasion in terms of the Jubilee. As you say, it is of a much larger scale, and that's why the responsibility up until now has been with the British Government in terms of funding and resources that are put in place to mark these events. There are many events within our community and across society that we could be marking, and where, of course, requests come to my department to do that, I have to manage all of those with the budget that I have and with the need. I mean, we're talking about a fuel crisis, with pressure around homelessness services. We have pressures within our community and voluntary sector as well. And I have to prioritise where I put resources. I do put money out on an annual basis through the Community Festival Fund that go to local government. And that's how I would allocate money to mark events across the board. So money does go out, but it goes via local government as well. So there's no central fund to fund any of these programmes, whether it was a Jubilee or any other key event which may be important to sections of our community. And therefore then I would ask organisations to contact their local councils or indeed in terms of the British Government who have been running out programmes to mark this event.
Mr John O'Dowd.
Thank you, Laskin Collier. Minister, can I preface my question by saying I respect the right of those who wish to celebrate the Jubilee celebrations later this year. And in response to Joanne's, I also respect the Queen. I think she's played a positive role in the peace process and reconciliation on the island of Ireland. However, you have just spent the start of question time outlining the problems and crises that are faced by many families across our entire society. So I would ask the Minister, is it not a priority to ensure that those who have least are given protection at this time, rather than using more funds? And I know Craigavon Council is spending £250,000 on Jubilee celebrations. But to come to my point, Minister, is it not the priority at this stage to support those families most in need?
I think, of course, totally, the Queen has played a positive role and is a very important figure to a large section of our community here, and I've no doubt, funding or no funding, they're going to mark the occasion, they're going to celebrate the occasion across the board. My priority in terms of funding, and I have been consistent in this, is to protect the most vulnerable within our communities and to target it at that. That's not to say that events like this don't have a role, but I direct funding in terms of festivals or occasions to local councils. I do that for a number of programmes. I've been approached for a number of different significant events which sections of our community feel are important, and indeed they've been directed through the same process in terms of local government. The funding that I retain within the department is focused on protecting those services around fuel that we've been looking at, housing, looking at homelessness services, and looking at organisations that work with those who are really facing financial hardship at this time.
Mr. Jim Allister.
The Minister is styled as the Minister for Communities. Why is it that when it comes to issues as this, she can never face the plurality of that title and take off her Republican blinkers and recognise her duty for all communities is to fund matters such as this? This is a minister who squandered millions on golf clubs.
Well, I am Minister for Communities, and I know many people and have been to many communities that come from a unionist or indeed a British traditioner who have respect for the Queen as well. And their key issues at this point in time are dealing with the cost of living crisis, or looking at issues in education and health, and looking at homelessness. And of course that's where I respond. I have delivered schemes right across the board and right across all communities. I've never looked at their background once, unlike some who ask questions on religious backgrounds. I deliver schemes across the board to those who need it most, and that's what I will continue to do in the time ahead. We are in a cost of living crisis. We've spoke about the fuel crisis. That's where my priority is at this moment in time.
Order. The Minister will be heard. The Minister, members have the right to ask questions, and the Minister has the right to expect to be heard. Mr. Patrick de Largy.
I was delighted to recently announce that my department will provide funding of $440,000 towards the Strathfoyle Greenway project. My department has been investing in the urban greenway network for several years, and supporting the Strathfoyle Community Greenway is a natural extension of that work and further add to my department's excellent track record for developing these types of projects. The 2.7-kilometre extension of the popular Waterside Greenway will link Strandtown Drive and Strathfoyle to Derry City Centre and the wider Greenway network. It will also provide a commuting route to Foyle Port and Maiden. I can advise that the full funding package is now in place, and Derry and Strabane District Council will lead on delivering the Greenway in partnership with my department, DFI and DAERA. This project is a great example of the partnership between various government departments, the local council and indeed local communities. And at present the procurement process is underway for the contractor, and it's anticipated that they will be appointed in February, with construction beginning in March of this year.
Mr. de Largy.
Thank the Minister for her answer and for her commitment to this project. It's fantastic to see this, not just in terms of health and well-being in Derry, but also in terms of connectivity, as the Minister's mentioned. So very pleased to see this. And again, obviously, as the Minister's already highlighted, the collaborative work between local government and the Assembly. Can I ask the Minister if there are any other similar projects in the Foyle constituency?
Yeah, well, of course, we've been doing a number of projects working within the North West as well, and of course we're looking at areas such as Harbour Square Public Realm, the Inner Walled City Public Realm, and as well as the Strabane Town Centre Public Realm. So there's a number of schemes and initiatives which are underway. There's a number of schemes planned. They're being looked at as well, and of course we're looking at larger schemes such as Fort George and other initiatives that were taken forward also.
Mr. Mark Durkan.
Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, I thank the Minister for her answer and in particular for her action. I was delighted to see her announcement of her approval of the final piece of the funding jigsaw for this project. It has been many years in gestation. Now we just have to put all those pieces together. This is, as others have said, a great example of cross-departmental collaboration and work with Council and the community. Can the Minister, I suppose, undertake to continue to work with other departments to ensure delivery for our rural communities?
I mean, there's been excellent work over the last 2 years in terms of conversations that I've had with DFI and DAERA ministers. We have actually collaborated and put together money which is targeted at rural settlements and communities as well. And there's a few programmes in terms of COVID response that we have done. Obviously, this programme is an extended part of that partnership as well. And I want to continue to work with those two departments in particular, but indeed any department, in terms of looking at how we can share resources to really meet the needs of local communities. So I think the partnership has really been good, and I want to continue to see that develop in the time ahead.
Mr. Alan Chambers.
Deputy Speaker, question 5.
The member will be aware that a judicial review has now been taken against the Department for Infrastructure's decision to grant planning permission. The draft full business case of November 2019 identified increased cost estimates due to the delays to the planning approval, construction inflation and repeated design stages. This increased cost estimate will now need to take account of any delays as a result of the judicial review, and discussions have been taking place and will continue with the GAA in respect of all these and associated matters, including the appointment of any projected increased project cost. Currently, there is no proposed change to the £15 million contribution already committed to by the GAA.
Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker. Minister, there is a growing perception in some soccer circles that I'm sure is misplaced that the delay of releasing funding under the sub-regional Stadia programme is linked to the ongoing Casement Park funding situation. Given that the Minister indicated last summer that release of the sub-regional funding was close, can't she give any reassurance of a timely sign-off in this mandate of this funding? Thank you.
Well, there's no connection between the two other than that they deliver sports for local communities. And I have a brother who's involved in soccer programmes, so I see it first hand from the work that he does in Belfast that sport plays in terms of young people and particularly men as well within communities. And of course, in terms of the sub-regional stadia, there had to be a refresh exercise because when the initial proposal for this programme, it was over a decade out of date. And even the last consultation back in 2016 was almost 5 years out of date, nearly when I came into post. So I did need to do a refreshment exercise. We're looking at the analysis of that, particularly looking at the impact of the pandemic as well, because when I had started that exercise, it was before COVID had fully hit. And obviously the pandemic has had an impact not just on football, but across all of the sports as well. So I'm still considering that information, and I am hopeful that I can move as quickly as possible once I've done that.
Ms Aisling Riley.
Minister, the redevelopment of Casement Park will be a significant investment and will provide a much-needed and economic cultural boost to West Belfast. And Minister, do you agree that that is exactly the type of tangible and transformative investment that the people want to see this executive deliver?
I think definitely. I mean, I played in Casement Park as a young camogue. I'm sure you did yourself as well. And to see the grounds sitting how they are at the moment, I mean, a decade of Gaels or a generation of Gaels have come up not having the experience, and indeed other sports as well. This, I suppose, development that we have seen, like other developments, be that over at Windsor or indeed at Kingspan as well. I mean, you can see the wider community benefits that it has. Obviously, the benefits for the sports concerned and the clubs at a grassroots level, right up to a more competitive level has. It obviously has benefits in terms of wider health and well-being, and of course in terms of the local economy, not just through the construction, but also businesses that are driving towards an area like this because of the footfall that will be seen. And of course we see our local transportation system be aligned to developments such as this. So Casement, when it is built, will have a definite positive benefit, not just for West Belfast or Belfast, but indeed across the north.
Mr Jonathan Buckley.
I agree with the member for North Down in his call for urgency in the delivery of the sub-regional stadium funding. There's no doubt that the hampering of funding is affecting the progression and modernisation of many local clubs. But in relation to Casement Park, the Minister will know, with costs spiralling for an eventual end project delivery, there is rightly a call for increased funding from the GAA. So can I ask the Minister, does she agree with her stand-in and predecessor, Carol McCullum, when she said it was no longer tenable for the GAA to hold the position that there would be no increase of a funding allocation from the GAA?
Well, I think with all of these things, I'm going to continue to engage with the GAA in respect of a range of matters pertaining to the redevelopment of Casement Park, and I will continue to keep that under review.
Mr Chris Little.
Speaker, football clubs across Northern Ireland are delivering high-quality grassroots participation and performance football, including high-quality games screened live by international broadcasters to a worldwide audience, such as the fantastic game between Cliftonville and Glentoran last night. But they're doing so in decades-old facilities that have had no public investment. Can I ask the Minister if she can give this House assurances that that sub-regional stadia funding that is so dearly needed is going to be released prior to the end of this mandate?
Well, the funding for the sub-regional is still there, and that will continue to be the case. I'm trying to work at pace in terms of looking at these issues. And of course, football and the stadiums are playing a real contribution to local communities. Some of them are in a state of disrepair, and I think you see that when you visit some of these places. And I also recognise that the £36.2 million that's been allocated is not going to be anywhere near enough. And I have always spoke about the potential need of a stage 2, which would look at the other sports as well, because demand is coming, from rugby and from other sports, and indeed Gaelic games in terms of at a grassroots level also. So we're going to continue to keep that under review. I am trying to move at pace in terms of the refreshment exercise that was done, particularly taking into account the impacts of COVID and any new types of designs that may need to be looked at for stadia going forward. And I will continue to try and move that as quickly as I can. But the funding is still there. It is a commitment from the Executive, and it will be something that will be delivered.
Mr Pat Cantney.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Minister, as we look at the Kilpoo, the Down football seniors that won that Ulster, this should be played in Belfast in the stadium as planned. Can you give an undertaking here, and the shortfall which has happened to the GAA and the big void that is there in senior games, to bring them back within where we are and back into that stadium in Belfast as quickly as possible?
Well, I think the redevelopment of Casement Park isn't just an Executive priority, it is a priority, I think, across the board, and particularly for Gaels right across Ulster and beyond. And I get that through my engagements that I have with the GAA as well. I think I want to get it done as quickly as possible. Obviously, there are now legal proceedings, and we have to wait for the outworkings of those proceedings. That has had a knock-on effect in terms of completing the business case, because we need to have the planning and all of that to be finalised. So as soon as we know the direction of travel in terms of the legal process, then we will be moving at pace to get everything completed in order to get Casement Park built as soon as possible.
Ms Emma Sheeran.
The whole question 6, please.
In line with my announcement and ministerial statement of the 15th of December last year, over £2.1 million has been made available to help employing organisations to improve the terms and conditions of the voluntary and community sector posts, which are funded through my department. This is focused on the following areas: allocations to allow employing organisations to ensure alignment with the most recent rate of the real living wage of £9 per hour, a consolidated 2% increase in current level of support provided by the Department for salaried posts, which has been calculated after ensuring that the real living wage rate is increased or is met, and a 7% non-consolidated payment, which has been calculated following applications of steps, of the 2 steps above, and an increase also to support and allow for increases in employers' pension contributions from the Government's recommended level of 3% to 5%. In addition, effective from January of this year, the 1st of January, funded organisations will no longer be required to inform the Department of Short-Term Sick Absences up to 5 working days for their employees in posts supported by my department.
I apologise. Time's up. We move on now to topical questions, and the first member on the list is Dr. Steve Aiken.
Could I ask the Minister, and thank you very much indeed for her answers previously, reference the emergency fuel payments. Obviously, we've known for some considerable time that this is likely to come. Has the Minister an idea of what the likely quantum is going through the rest of this year, and indeed increasingly as it looks like into 2023?
That analysis is being looked at the moment. Officials are looking at that. Obviously, we're continuing to engage with the utility regulator, who has given a forecast of how this is going to look over the next year and indeed going into 2023. As you say, we're waiting on that analysis being completed. We know even from the Bryson scheme, we're obviously doing more analysis in terms of the types of people, what their backgrounds are in terms of the predicament that they find themselves in as well. So we're looking at all of these issues. I am hopeful to get a more clear picture that I want to present to that British Irish Council meeting on the 4th of February, so we can provide more detail as soon as that analysis is completed.
Dr. Aiken.
May I thank the Minister for her answer so far. The Minister alluded to conversations that the Minister for Finance and indeed the Minister for Economy, if I get her correct, were talking about VAT payments and reduction of VAT for 5%. Has the Minister had any conversations with the Treasury? Because, of course, the reduction of VAT payments to 5% across our nation, the United Kingdom, in England, Scotland and Wales at 5% can be achieved. But, of course, because of the protocol in Northern Ireland, it can't be because it's against state aid rules.
I think the Finance Minister has written to Treasury on that regard. I know that he has joined also his Scottish and Welsh counterparts in pushing the British Government to respond. And of course, this was discussed at the Executive briefly at its meeting last week. So again, we want to continue that engagement ongoing. There is the opportunity, as I say, in this dedicated discussion with the British Irish Council meeting, looking at energy costs. The Minister for the Economy is the main minister. I'm the accompanying minister to go along to that meeting. And of course, we're continuing to engage. Obviously, the Economy Minister has responsibility around energy, and indeed he's gone out on consultation looking at the strategy at the moment. So we're going to continue to keep this under review to see what other measures can be brought in to alleviate some of the stresses. Obviously, VAT is one quick way that could potentially be done, but we need to see the outcome of the Treasury response. I'm not aware of Treasury responding on the basis of the protocol. I haven't heard any indication around that, but we're continuing to respond. And I'm sure the Finance Minister will give an update because it's been him who has directly contacted Treasury.
Mr. Trevor Clark.
Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, Minister has been already alluded to in terms of the pressures that many of our constituents are facing in relation to energy costs, and I accept that you did refer to Bryson's scheme, and indeed the other scheme that you announced last week. Of the Bryson scheme and indeed of the other scheme, how much of that money is actually out now and reached the ground of those people who actually require it?
In terms of the Bryson scheme, I don't have the exact figure in terms of the money, just the applications that we've paid out is 1,098. We've obviously given approval for 1,323. So I'll get you the exact financial figure of how much has been paid out. I don't have it in front of me. In terms of the larger scheme, the 55 million, that was just obviously announced by the Executive last week, so I couldn't progress that scheme until I got the approval from the Executive to do that. We're obviously engaging with the Department of Work and Pensions to look at how quickly we can make those payments, and once I have a date for payments to be made, I will indeed be letting the committee and indeed this chamber know. But I'm trying to get that out as soon as possible.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. I'm sure, Minister, you'll appreciate that very many of these people are in a very needy position, and indeed we're in the period of, I suppose, the winter as we are as it stands, whilst mild that it may be this week. However, many of these people are very needy and are expecting this money probably soon. But what would the Minister say in relation to the difficulties people have in relation to accessing the Bryson scheme? And what would you also say to the working poor, the people who actually will not qualify for this payment, even to those people who are actually equally finding it difficult as those who are relying on benefits?
I suppose on the one hand, in terms of the £55 million scheme, I mean, I had this proposal initially in last year. Unfortunately, it didn't get on the executive agenda until last week, so there was an automatic delay there in terms of progressing it, but that's for others to answer in terms of it not making it onto the executive table. The other areas in terms of the Bryson scheme, I mean, I covered some of this earlier. This is additional to that £200 direct payment scheme, which will go to 281,000 individuals. It was never meant, I mean, this was never going to be a large-scale scheme. It was to be additional on top of other supports that were there to try and reach out to those who wouldn't get the direct payment, because I do recognise, in terms of the title of the working poor, those who actually may fall below the poverty line, but of course they're not on a means-tested benefit. I did try to look, as I said earlier, in terms of tax credits. We know there's around 50,000 people here in receipt of tax credits. But unfortunately, because that's a reserved matter, HMRC, we offered that we would extend the payment and give the money to HMRC to make that payment of £200 to those on tax credits. We were told that they weren't able to do that. It would need primary legislation and that the payments couldn't be done. Some of the difficulty in terms of the department then doing it is we don't hold the payment data. We asked for the payment data if there was a way that we could extend. And again, because of data sharing, it needs primary legislation. So none of that could be done in time. Now, obviously, we need to look at that in the longer term, that we don't end up potentially in this predicament again. But because they are reserved powers under tax, then I have no legal control over them. I have no way to pay them. Now, the Bryson scheme we're keeping under constant review in terms of trying to get the support out there. Is there a need to ramp up? Can we look at other ways of extending the criteria of the scheme? The difficulty will then be trying to get the data in order to make the payments, but we are looking at that at the moment. Happy to have officials engage. I know they've met, and I know Bryson themselves have met a number of MLAs looking at these issues. But any scheme of scale, I mean, we have targeted means-tested benefits at this point.
Ms Cara Hunter.
Principal Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister for her detailed answers so far. Minister, in my constituency of East Derry and across the north, we're facing a real issue with a rental crisis. Many families are being made to move out of homes that they've lived in for years, and they're met with a market that has been inflated beyond belief, and where rentals are available, they're at extortionate prices. So can I ask the Minister today for an update on what her department is doing to introduce a rent cap here in the north? Thank you.
Well, you'll know firstly that there's the private rented sector legislation that's progressing at the moment. That obviously deals with some areas around rent in that there can't be an increase more than once a year, and there has to be the notification around that. There's more work done in terms of looking at what powers there are here in terms of a rental cap that couldn't be done in time of the legislation. And indeed, to try and get legislation through quickly, that would never have been done. So obviously an assessment of that is being looked at the moment. I mean, in one of my visits in and around Portrush towards the end of last year, I had a discussion with the local chief executive of the council there looking at these issues. And of course, obviously, we want to engage proactively around local development plans, around the plan and function, importantly around the housing supply strategy, which is out for consultation at the moment, to look at what additional measures we can look like. I know there's many seaside towns across these islands, and particularly when you look at, your holidays and stuff here, that's increasing the pressure. So we're continuing to look at other measures, but there will be a private rented sector bill in the next mandate of the Assembly, and I am hopeful that that will include looking at the issue of rent caps.
Ms Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer. And I welcome that there is an introduction of a limit that landlords can only raise rent once a year. But can the Minister assure my constituents that she will do all she can in her power in this mandate to create or contribute to appropriate legislation that will cap the amount that landlords can raise these rental costs to? Thank you.
Well, we're proactively looking at that. I would be lying to you if I said that could be done in this mandate, because physically, legally, it can't. And more analysis needs to be done, and that's what we're proactively doing at the moment. So we're looking to see what type of legislation can be crafted to look at rent caps. Obviously, all members of this Assembly will be keen to scrutinise and to look at that legislation, and rightly so. So my officials are currently looking at this at the moment and trying to benchmark in other jurisdictions as well. But it is something that I'm keen to see in a private rented sector bill in the new mandate to be brought forward.
Ms Aisling Riley.
The Minister has spoken about and mentioned several times about the £55 million scheme that she announced to help the most vulnerable cope with the spiralling cost of energy. Minister, can you provide an update on the rollout of this welcome and huge initiative?
Yeah, well, as we said earlier, it was £55 million, thankfully, that all of the executive signed off on last week. That will see £200 payments directly paid into people's bank accounts or post office accounts for over 280,000 people. That will include those on means-tested benefits in terms of the lowest income families within our communities, and that is those in receipt of pension credit, universal credit, income-related employment support allowance, income-related job seekers allowance and income support.
Ms Riley.
Thank you for that update, and also for your leadership in tackling the cost of living crisis which thousands of families are facing this winter. And your intervention is hugely welcomed and is night and day to the indifference of the Tory millionaires in London. So given Westminster policies such as Brexit, years of austerity cuts which have contributed to this crisis, do you agree that the British Government must also act to take the pressure of hard-pressed families and workers on low incomes?
I think definitely in terms of the powers they have, and particularly the reserved powers that I spoke about earlier in terms of tax credits and others, looking at the issue of VAT. And I know the Executive in its discussion last week wants to continue to push the British Government on these measures, and indeed myself and Gordon Lyons, as I said, will be going to that meeting of the British Irish Council on the 4th of February to discuss these issues.
Mr Andy Allen.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Minister, from the briefing the Department for Communities Committee received from your officials, they indicated that the funding, the £2 million funding for the Bryson Charitable Group scheme, came from departmental easements. Can you give more detail on what those easements were?
I don't have those at hand, Andy, but I can formally communicate that with you in terms of easements that have come up. I know in terms of the money that I wanted to put to the scheme, I wanted to make sure that that was going directly into people's pockets. Thankfully, working with the Utilities Regulator and the Consumer Council, and indeed with some of the utility companies themselves, they were able to find the money to support Bryson in terms of the implementation of the scheme, which means the £2 million that I'm putting in will go directly to families. But I'll get you the specific detail.
Mr Allen for supplementary.
Thank the Minister for answer. Minister, during that same briefing, your officials confirmed to the committee that no consideration had been given to additional funding for the 3-year budget period. Therefore, we had talked about ongoing support and the need for that through the remainder of further years. Can you advise how the Department is going to achieve that with no additional funding?
Well, I think the budget overall is a difficult budget in terms of what we get through the Barnett formula in terms of the block grant. Obviously, in terms of a prioritisation of health as well, that does present challenges. I suppose for me, in looking at the budget at the moment, my approach will be to protect the most vulnerable within our communities, to ensure that services that meet the needs or target those individuals and communities the most is what I want to prioritise going forward. So I'm obviously looking at that at the moment. I know the committee has had briefings in terms of the funding cycles, and I will be looking at that. And of course I will continue to make bids and monitoring rounds that will continue throughout the next period. And I'm hopeful that whoever takes this role in May will continue to do the same as well.
Mr Mark Durkan.
I thank the Minister for her answers thus far. I welcome the launch of the Social Housing Supply Strategy consultation, in which, and I quote the departmental press release, the Minister outlines her plans to deliver over 100,000 homes over 15 years. Could the Minister provide a breakdown of the 100,000 homes that she hopes to provide?
Well, I think the member will know in terms of the strategy. What I'm saying is that if the processes are put in place in terms of the mechanisms for the development of homes, then we can be ambitious and deliver over 100,000 homes. I know that there's a section within that will be social housing development programme, and of course over the last year I have increased the budget, thankfully, in terms of that programme itself. There's a number of other analyses that need to be done in terms of providing more detailed information as to where those homes will be. Not all of them will be within the social rented sector. It will be made up of our whole housing system and stock in the time ahead. So once that analysis is done, I can give more specific information in terms of a breakdown. I think the strategy is important, and I think it was important to put a figure in it. We could have had a thing of not putting any figure in, but I think we do need to be ambitious. We need to be giving people a figure of what we can be doing, and of course then I will be continuing to work with infrastructure and others to look at the issues of connection of critical infrastructure that we need in terms of house building going forward.
I'm afraid time is up. If members will take their ease for a change at the top table, the next item on the agenda is return to the integrated education